Carl Jung believed that the life of a man is not a quest for comfort, nor a chase for surface-level happiness, but a deep, often painful journey toward individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are. And that journey, without exception, leads through darkness. Not because pain is noble on its own, but because pain strips away illusions. It reveals what you've been avoiding, suppressing and projecting. It brings the unconscious into the light, if you dare to look. Many men grow up believing that suffering for love will earn them admiration, that sacrificing for a woman will secure her devotion. That pain, offered openly and sincerely, will be repaid with gratitude. But Jung saw clearly, this belief often arises not from inner strength, but from unconscious need, a yearning to be completed by something outside, the self. What the modern man calls love is often a projection, a psychological mirage. He meets a woman and does not truly see her. Instead, he sees his anima, the symbolic feminine within his psyche, the part of him he's disowned, the emotional, intuitive, nurturing energy he unconsciously seeks. And because he's unaware of this projection, he assumes that she holds the key to his wholeness. But this illusion is not love. It's dependence. It's the hope that she will heal a wound that was never hers to heal, that she will validate a man who has yet to validate himself. And when she doesn't respond with reverence to his self-sacrifice, he is left confused, hurt, and bitter, convinced that she rejected his soul when in fact she never received it. She saw a man who had made her responsible for his wholeness. Jung taught that the anima can guide a man toward depth, but only when he withdraws the projection and integrates her consciously. Until then, she acts as a siren, seductive, powerful, but ultimately misleading. The man believes he's in love with her, but in truth, he's in love with the missing part of himself. And this is why his pain becomes sacred, not because it should be worshipped, but because it can awaken him. The man who suffers in silence, hoping to be noticed, admired, or saved, has misunderstood his task. Jung said, man's task is to become conscious of the contents that press upward from the unconscious. His pain is not a ticket to her heart. It is a signal from the soul that he has lost touch with his own center. The more he externalizes his suffering, showing it, dramatizing it, begging for it to be witnessed, the further he drifts from the path of individuation. Because what the feminine instinct truly respects is not the man who suffers loudly, but the man who transforms silently, the man who bleeds without resentment, who carries the wound and learns from it, not uses it to gain pity. Jung did not vilify women. He saw them as carriers of profound symbolic meaning. In relationship, woman becomes both mirror and initiator. She awakens in man everything he has refused to see: his longing, his fear, his sensitivity, his hidden desires. She can bring out his nobility or expose his immaturity. She can lead him into greatness or plunge him into obsession. But she does not do this deliberately. She is simply reflecting what already lives within him. And this reflection is uncomfortable. He may interpret her lack of gratitude as betrayal, her indifference as cruelty, but in truth, she is not rejecting him. She is rejecting the false self he projected onto her, the self that wants to be adored for suffering instead of respected for growing. Jung warned that the anima can destroy a man who refuses to take responsibility for his inner world. He becomes addicted to emotional highs and devastated by perceived abandonment. He confuses need with love. He lives in the fantasy of, if I suffer enough, she will see me. But that suffering is not transformation. It's performance. True, transformation begins when the man turns inward, when he stops chasing approval and starts asking, what part of me am I asking her to complete? He begins to see that the pain he thought she caused was actually his own resistance to becoming whole. The modern man is taught that vulnerability means exposure, showing your wounds, your fears, your softness. But the feminine instinct doesn't respond to unprocessed pain. It responds to presence, to steadiness, to integration. To the man who doesn't hide his suffering, but doesn't worship it either. This is why many good men are overlooked. Not because they're too kind, but because their kindness comes from need, not sovereignty. They give everything hoping to be seen, but they forget. Sacrifice without self-respect is invisible to the feminine soul. Jung believed that the goal of suffering is not recognition. It is realization. To suffer consciously is to refine the soul. To suffer unconsciously is to repeat the wound. So no, your pain is not the problem. Your problem is forgetting what it's for. You were never meant to bleed in front of her and ask to be saved. You were meant to bleed, to look down at your wound and ask, what truth am I being asked to see? Only then does the anima cease to be a tormentor. She becomes a guide. The woman no longer appears as savior or enemy. She becomes herself, free of your projections. And only then can real love begin, because no real love is born in fantasy. It is born when the man no longer needs her approval to stand, when he no longer believes that suffering is a ticket to her devotion, when he understands that his pain is not her responsibility, it's his transformation. You are not here to be broken open for others to admire your wounds. You are here to learn how to walk through the fire and come out forged, not for applause, not for attention, but because that is what it means to become a man. The man who suffers and rages is still enslaved. The man who suffers and understands, he is free. Carl Jung taught that every relationship is a mirror, and few mirrors reflect more brutally than the one we see in the eyes of the feminine. A woman does not simply respond to your charm, your logic, or even your effort. She responds to your state of being, to your unresolved fears, to the hidden boy behind the man. And if you are unaware of what you carry inside, her presence will feel like rejection, judgment, or cold indifference. But in truth, she is not the enemy. She is the reflection. Jung warned that when a man has not integrated his shadow, the unconscious, darker aspects of his psyche, he's doomed to project it onto others. He will blame women for his confusion. He will call them cruel, manipulative, ungrateful. But what he really sees is his own pain reflected back at him, a pain he never dared to face directly. This is why so many men feel unseen, despite giving everything. They do not realize that what they give is still a performance, a mask, a cry for attention dressed as selflessness. And the unconscious feminine, the anima within them, despises inauthenticity. It wants wholeness, not pleading. Jung's view was never that women were malicious. Instead, he saw that the woman, both real and symbolic, was deeply tuned to instinct, to energy, to truth without words. When a man shows weakness hoping for comfort, she may not respond the way he expects. Not because she's cruel, but because on a deeper level, she recognizes weakness that seeks validation, and evolution doesn't reward that. In nature, the masculine is called to build structure, to protect, to aim toward purpose. The feminine is the field in which he is tested. She is not there to complete him. She is there to show him what he still lacks, not through words, but through her instinctual reactions. So when a man complains that she didn't appreciate me, or she left even after I gave her everything, it's not the woman he needs to understand, it's himself. He needs to ask, what was I really offering? Love, or a disguised demand to be fixed, to be needed, to be mothered? The modern man, disconnected from initiation and myth, often confuses partnership with rescue. He wants her to rescue him from his loneliness, his emptiness, his lack of inner purpose. But that is not a woman's role. That is the role of the inner masculine, the sovereign within, the force that says, even if she walks away, I remain centered. Until this inner masculine awakens, a man remains a boy in the presence of the feminine, and the feminine will test him, not out of cruelty, but out of instinct, because nature itself asks, can you hold your ground when the world doesn't affirm you? Can you stay rooted in your truth, even when your heart is breaking? Can you suffer without collapsing into blame or need? Jung believed that a man must earn his own soul, and often it is through the fire of relationships that this soul is forged. The woman is not the reward. She is the catalyst. She draws out. His longing exposes his ego and mirrors his hidden fears. She brings him face to face with his anima, not as a goddess to be worshipped, but as a power to be integrated. Integration means this: you stop seeing her as the one who should have seen your pain, and you start asking, why did I need her to see it in the first place? You stop blaming her for being indifferent and ask, what part of me still believes my pain needs permission to exist? You stop romanticizing your sacrifice and start owning your wounds as your responsibility, because until you do that, you will. Keep choosing women who reflect your unconscious needs, not your conscious values. You will keep calling tests, betrayals, and projections love. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That is what happens when a man believes that women always choose the wrong man or never appreciate the nice guy. It's not fate, it's his unexamined psyche choosing situations that match his wounds. If you have ever wondered why your devotion was ignored, why your honesty went unnoticed, why your pain felt invisible, it's not because women don't care. It's because the woman in front of you was responding not to your intentions, but to your energy, your truth, your inner clarity. And if that energy was coming from need, from desperation, from a desire to be validated through suffering, her instincts closed the door. Not out of cruelty, but because life does not reward unresolved pain that demands recognition. It rewards pain that has been transmuted into presence. So when you find yourself aching for her to see your effort, to recognize your sacrifice, pause. Ask, what would happen if I no longer needed her to see it? What if you saw it? What if your own soul stood up and said, you have suffered and you have survived, now grow. This is the essence of Jung's path, not to win others but to win back yourself. To stop outsourcing your identity to the feminine and to become whole, masculine and feminine integrated, shadow embraced, pain understood. The man who blames women remains stuck. The man who learns from them becomes sovereign. The woman is not your enemy, she is your mirror. And if you dare to look clearly, what you will see is not her rejection, but your own opportunity for rebirth. One of the hardest truths a man must face, Jung would say, is that pain does not make you visible, at least not in the way you might hope. A man may believe that his willingness to suffer for love, for family, for his ideals will make him worthy, that it will elicit recognition, appreciation, perhaps even reverence. But when that recognition does not come, he is often left hollow, bitter, confused. Why didn't she see what I gave up for her? Why didn't they notice how much I carried in silence? But Jung's answer is clear. Suffering only transforms when it becomes conscious. Unconscious suffering, the kind that is endured while hoping someone else will reward or redeem you, remains invisible because it is still attached to illusion. It is not yet yours. The modern man is raised in a culture that tells him vulnerability is power, that openness guarantees love. But Jung would caution, exposure is not integration. Revealing your wounds is not the same as owning them. Crying in front of her may feel authentic, but if it comes from the desire to be rescued, it will not evoke devotion. It will evoke instinctive distance, because what the feminine instinct truly respects, and Jung observed this deeply, is not a man who suffers, but a man who understands his suffering, who stands in it without collapsing, who carries it, not to be praised, but because it is his path to wholeness. This is why so many men feel that their kindness, their sacrifices, their soft hearts go unnoticed. It is not because women are blind. It is because need masquerading as love does not awaken admiration. It awakens pressure, and the unconscious feminine does not reward pressure. She rewards presence, and so the man who bleeds openly and waits to be thanked may wait forever. Because pain that begs for recognition is still bound to the boy within, and the feminine does not nurture boys who seek mothers in women. She instinctively recoils. Jung saw this dynamic play out repeatedly. The man casts his anima, his inner image of the perfect woman, onto a real woman, believing she will heal him, see him, complete him. But when she fails to meet this unconscious fantasy, he collapses into despair or resentment. He believes he was betrayed, but in truth he betrayed himself by expecting someone else to make him whole. The journey out of this cycle begins not by suppressing your emotions, but by meeting them without expectation. When your suffering becomes something you observe, examine, and integrate, instead of something you present for approval, it begins to transform you from the inside. This is the core of Jung's philosophy. Meaning is found through conscious relationship with the unconscious. When you suffer and rage against life for being unfair, you are still entangled. But when you suffer and listen, when you sit with the pain and ask, "What is this trying to teach me?" you move towards sovereignty. The woman in your life is not the judge of your worth. She is the reflection of your readiness. She will not always soothe you. Sometimes she will test you. Not because she wants you to fail, but because her instinct is drawn to a man who can hold his own center, especially when it trembles. So, when she seems indifferent to your sacrifices, when she does not thank you for your gentle words or applaud your efforts, stop asking, "Why doesn't she see me?" and ask instead, "Do I see myself? Do I recognize the strength it takes to walk through this world with an open heart and a disciplined mind? Do I honor the dignity of my own suffering? Or do I discard it unless someone else validates it?" Jung taught that the true masculine is not made in comfort, but in contact with the depths, not through rejection of pain, but through its integration, not by silencing emotions, but by not being enslaved by them. The man who suffers consciously begins to walk with presence. He no longer demands softness because he has cultivated inner strength. He no longer needs praise because he respects his own process. And in that quiet, grounded presence, the feminine responds, not always with adoration, but with recognition. Recognition not for your tears, but for your integration. Not for your pain, but for your presence within the pain. Not for what you gave, but for who you became in the giving. So if you feel invisible, do not perform louder. Do not suffer more in hopes of being seen. Go inward, ask, "What am I still waiting to be saved from?" Then answer yourself with silence, stillness, and strength. Your suffering does not need a witness. It needs your attention. And once it has that, it no longer controls you. It reveals you. This is how the masculine rises, not by escaping pain, not by punishing the feminine, but by recognizing that his deepest wounds were never obstacles, they were invitations. Carl Jung understood what most men resist their entire lives, that suffering is not the enemy, it is the initiator. Not the thing to be avoided, but the fire through which the man must walk in order to become whole. The ancient stories understood this. The myths of heroes, of Odysseus, of Gilgamesh, of Parsifal, all speak of men who were not praised for their comfort or charm, but for their willingness to endure trials that revealed their soul. Not because they sought pain, but because pain was the only path to transformation. Jung's psychology is mythic at its core. He saw in the suffering man not a victim, but an alchemist. A man presented with the raw materials of shadow, fear, and longing, and given the sacred task of turning it into gold. Not literal gold, but spiritual substance, the kind that gives presence to a man's gaze, weight to his silence, clarity to his action. But this transformation never happens as long as the man clings to external validation, as long as he believes that his suffering should earn him love, attention, reward. He remains outside himself, entangled in illusion. And this is where many men falter. They imagine that love means comfort, that being seen means being saved. But Jung pointed out that the archetypal feminine does not arrive to soothe. She arrives to awaken. Her presence stirs the unconscious. She activates the parts of the man he has long ignored, and in doing so she often disorients him. This is not cruelty, it is initiation. She is the storm, not to destroy him, but to see whether he can build a stronger ship. She brings the flame not to burn him, but to reveal what parts of him are flammable, what parts were never truly him to begin with. And so, many men confuse her tests with rejection. They confuse her indifference with punishment. But in truth, what they experience is not personal betrayal. It is the mirror of the masculine spirit, unready to stand in full form. Jung taught that the man who suffers with understanding becomes sovereign. He no longer depends on her warmth to validate his strength. He no longer offers his pain in hopes of earning her loyalty. He no longer collapses under the weight of being unseen, because he has learned to see himself, and something profound happens when he reaches that point. The need for her recognition dissolves, the craving for her softness fades, and from that inner stillness, a new kind of power emerges, one that does not dominate nor submit, but commands respect through presence alone. This is not the loud, performative masculinity of dominance. This is the silent authority of a man who has walked through fire and did not flinch, a man who knows what he is, a man who does not need to be chosen, because he has already chosen himself. When a man reaches this state, the feminine responds differently. She no longer feels the pull to test him. She no longer questions his center, because she senses this man cannot be shaken, not by emotion, not by abandonment, not by the chaos of relationship. This is the moment where real love becomes possible, when two sovereign beings meet, not to complete each other, but to recognize each other, not to heal each other's wounds, but to witness one another's fullness. But the path to this moment is long. It requires that a man stop blaming the world, women, or fate for his suffering, and start reading his pain as scripture. Every wound becomes a lesson. Every rejection becomes redirection. Every heartbreak becomes an opening into something far more sacred, the self. Jung said that the goal is not perfection, but wholeness. And wholeness requires the integration of opposites, strength and softness, confidence and humility, clarity and confusion, joy and pain. The man who integrates becomes untouchable, not because he feels nothing, but because he knows what every feeling means. He no longer gets swept away by despair. He no longer clings to fantasy. He no longer begs the world to give him what he must build within. He has faced the darkest chambers of his own psyche and stood there long enough for the light to return. This is the crucible, this is the fire, and this is why suffering, when walked consciously, does not crush a man. It reveals him. So when the world tests you, when the woman withdraws her warmth, when the path ahead grows dark, do not ask, "Why is this happening to me?" Ask, what part of me is being invited to rise? Do not resist the pain. Do not worship it either. Walk through it with the quiet dignity of a man who knows this is not the end, this is the forging. There comes a point in a man's journey where he stops asking, why did she leave? Why didn't she see me? Why wasn't I enough? And instead he asks, what part of me was never mine to begin with? Carl Jung called this moment the turning of the soul inward. the end of projection, the collapse of illusion, and the beginning of true inner authority. It is not the end of suffering, it is the transformation of suffering into strength, not a performance, not a plea, but a quiet, unshakable presence born from fire. You were not meant to be loved for your tears. You were not called to prove your worth through pain. You were not put here to bleed in hopes of being seen. You were put here to see yourself, to see the shadow you cast, the anima you chase, the boyhood beliefs that told you love must be earned through sacrifice, and then to outgrow them. The woman does not complete you. She reveals you. She mirrors your gaps, your hunger, your longing, but it is not her job to fill them. That is your work. That is your calling, and the man who accepts this becomes not bitter, but sovereign. He no longer moves through the world, begging for ease. He moves with purpose, with clarity, with the stillness of one who knows who he is, with or without applause. Jung did not tell men to reject women. He told them to see them clearly, to see beyond projection, beyond fantasy, beyond the archetype of the rescuer, the nurturer, the goddess, and to meet her, fully human, flawed, alive. Only then can real connection begin, because when a man no longer demands softness, he begins to embody strength. When he no longer asks to be saved, he becomes safe. And when he no longer suffers for validation, he begins to suffer with dignity, and that is where devotion is born. Not because he sought it, but because he no longer needed it. You were not born to be pitied. You were born to be revered, and reverence is not handed to you. It is earned through solitude, through honesty, through fire. So if you feel tested, good. If she seems indifferent, good. If the world does not recognize your effort, good. That means the mirror is working. That means you are being called to rise without applause, to lead yourself, to know that strength is not measured by admiration, but by the inner stillness that remains when everything else is stripped away. This is individuation. This is sovereignty. This is what Jung spent his life mapping, the path of the soul that stops chasing what it already carries within. So suffer well, not loudly but consciously. Not as a boy asking to be saved, but as a man who understands that even pain is sacred when it is met with awareness. And when you engage with women again, do so not from need, but from wholeness. Let her fire temper you. Let her presence reveal you. Let her storm test your structure. But let your spirit stand unmoved, because love, at its highest, is not the escape from pain. It is the union of two souls who have faced it, survived it, and returned not wounded, but wise. You are not here to win her approval. You are here to wear the crown, the one forged in fire. And if you embrace that, you won't just love differently, you will live differently.